So here's the player problem solver paradigm. And again, the player problem solver paradigm is all about looking at a player's performance on the field more holistically and not reducing them down to these individualized traits. So we want to look at their performance through this lens where we're asking whether or not the player took the problem on the field and whether or not they solved it correctly, which means there was adequacy and accuracy, meaning they adequately or correctly solved the problem, and was there precision, accuracy, precision of movement relative to the different types of sensory corrections that needed to be made in that moment. Was it solved quickly? Was there quickness of wit and resolution, rapidity of successive movements? Was there rationality in their solution, right? Was there economy and expediency? Was there resourcefulness? Was there any type of an understanding or initiative taken upon the player themselves as they began to see the problem unfold? Were they able to adapt? And again, this is a continuum, right? A continuum that we're looking at from a very functional solution or least functional solution to a very skillful solution. And again, players exist throughout this entire continuum of behavior. So let's go ahead and see if we can take a look at Gary Bryant Jr. throughout these exposures, and let's go ahead and see how he meets some of these criteria. So here we go. He's the returner. Okay, so let's rewind that back and take a look at some of the key points. Okay, so through a player problem solver lens, what we're looking at is the problems that this returner, Gary Bryant Jr., has to solve on the field and where he might be getting information. So whether consciously or subconsciously, he's definitely probably aware of these defenders and their attack angle. He's certainly aware of where he is relative to this sideline, and he's probably aware that there's space all to this outside, all to his right-hand side, all out here. So in order to solve this problem, he's got to make a decision based on what his capacities or effectivities are, the opponents, the field, and how this problem is going to really constrain or shape his solution. So as we kind of begin to let this unfold, again, I want to show you something. As I begin to let this play kind of unfold just with these markings are almost like a timestamp, right, of what the problem looked like at one moment in time. And yet, if we just let it play out even a second later, okay, do you see how it's literally, this is where we were, and then within seconds, you could see, within milliseconds, the problem has changed. And now that the problem has changed, this kind of offers a completely different perspective in terms of how Gary Bryant must change. So by the time he has his balance, and by the time he's made a decision to attack space on the outside, you could kind of see that there's no longer an opportunity here. This player has closed down. You could see by the markings that we had on the field, right? Here were the original markings, and you can see that this player right here, this defender, has adapted to him, and not only has he increased his speed, and his trajectory is now more at an angle that's going to collide or collision with Gary Bryant, but this defender is also alternating his angle to contain or attack. So what you get is the problem has now emerged. It's changed in time. And now Gary Bryant needs to change his approach in time. What is he going to do? So again, if we go back to the player problem solver paradigm, we want to look at, now that the problem has changed, what is the accuracy or the precision of movement? What is his precision of sensory corrections? How quickly is he resolving this solution? And what type of rapidity of successive movements is he showing? Is there economy? Is there a sense of resourcefulness? Does he appear to see this coming and have a plan in place? So let's kind of see what happens as this unfolds. Okay, so let me get rid of these markings so we can see this unfold. And what you see is that He takes an inside cutting angle. He's aware of the trajectory and he spins off the collision. In spinning off the collision, he made a decision of how tight to spin off that collision so as not to collide with this defender. But you'll notice, though, that he's able to maintain his balance and he's able to get upfield. Now, as that's happening, you can kind of see as we come out of our spin move, you can see that there's yet another. The problem is changing yet again. Spaces change. We're farther from the sideline. This distance to this sideline is beginning to be compressed. He now has the affordances of more blockers, the opportunity to use more blockers. He can clearly see that there's a player coming at him. So now that we're in a new problem, how does this problem begin to shape his solution? So if we begin to play this out, and again, using the power of these markings as like a timestamp, what we begin to see is you could see that he is already accelerating at a trajectory away from his opponent at a rate that will not impact whether or not he'll be collided. In other words, his ability to run faster than his opponent has afforded him the opportunity to avoid this collision entirely. So I assume this guy is not going to even make contact with him. So let's go ahead and see how that goes. And as you can see right there, probably a block in the back, but right there, nope, no block in the back. He didn't even touch him. He didn't even touch him. Right there. Doesn't even touch him. And as the problem unfolds, right here, we see another opportunity. You can see very tight quarters, right? We see that we have a defender coming this way. We have defenders in pursuit, and we're really up against now this sideline. So now the space or the gaps available for passing through are really on this side of the screen. So we got to see what he can do. It's hard to dictate or determine what types of information he might be connecting to here relative to this angle, but you clearly don't have blockers. There's no blockers to be seen. Okay? We clearly know that we're almost to our goal, which is our task goal, which is to score points at all costs if we can. And we know that we're constrained by the sideline for our movement to the right, but yet we have some gaps or passable gaps on our left. So let's see how he goes ahead and adapts here to this moment. And he ends up cutting back across the frame of that player. So this gap must have been about 2 yards, probably about a 2-yard gap, and he was able to calibrate or coordinate his body to make that transition. It's a lot of eccentric strength that the player is showing to stop his forward momentum and cut back across his body and be able to make that transition into the end zone.